Welcome to this week's episode of the Crazy Catholics Podcast. I'm your host, Raph, and I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Giada. In today's episode, we are talking about the musical, the one and only, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, that Gigi and I were in this spring. And we'll just talk about our experiences from the show, and we'll say our favorite moments during that entire process. But before we get into it, let's remember that we are in the holy presence of God, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
So today's verse I'm very proud of because I truly feel like this reflects the idea of the Hunchback of Notre Dame and one of the main themes, which I think, put simply, is don't judge a book by its cover. But put more biblically, it goes a little something like this. But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 17. So, like I said, I chose this verse because it perfectly reflects the life of the protagonist in The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Quasimodo. If you are unfamiliar with the story, Quasimodo is a harshly outcast guy. He's not a creature, but the people treat him as one, because he has a facial deformity and a crooked spine. For the first time in his life, he's shown kindness by someone, Esmeralda, who befriends him. And like this Bible verse says, she looks beyond his outward appearance and sees him as he truly is, a beautiful soul. Esmeralda herself is discriminated against, and so she knows how it feels to be in Quasimodo's position. So together, the two of them share that common struggle. And it's just this really beautiful story of humanity and looking beyond someone's differences in order to love them. And like the story of Hunchback, this verse reminds us to love our brothers and sisters regardless of our differences. Because at the end of the day, we are all made in the image and likeness of God. Dear Lord, as we reflect on the beautiful God-given experience that was participating in the Hunchback of Notre Dame, help us to remember the happy memories we made along the way. Remind us that this story reveals the good sides of humanity, but also the ugliest. It is an important story to share with our listeners, and we are grateful to tell them the tale today. And most importantly, we thank you for the wonderful experience that was bringing the bells to life. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
All right. So, like Gigi said, we're going to talk about the Hunchback. We'll first talk about the Hunchback, what it is, and then we'll talk about the auditioning, everything basically about theater. That's the generality of it.
Spoiler alert, we're theater kids.
Okay. Wow. No way. Anyway, so, right, yeah, we'll talk about the rehearsal journey, and then we'll talk about some mishaps, because everyone loves when a show goes wrong. And
I have a really good story about this show going wrong, guys. We'll get to that later.
Right. And then the actors and actresses like to talk about them. So then we'll finish it with the emotional impacts, closing night, reflecting, and then wrap it up with a reflecting experience. But like I say, every single episode, context is key. So Hunchback is a musical, obviously. It never hit Broadway because it is a lot of effort and money to put into this show, to put it on.
It was originally a novel by Victor Hugo that was turned into a Disney show and then became a musical. So it's had a lot of different forms, but my favorite one, having read the book and seen the Disney movie, definitely is the musical.
Right. I would agree. Right. My coworker on campus ministry would disagree with both of us and say the movie's the best. He's wrong. You know who you are. But anyway, I digress. Yes. So this is a show that has very dark elements in it, definitely. If you've seen the movie, that's not really, I mean, it's there, but it's not really there when you look compared to the show and the book. If Victor Hugo is bringing any bells, pun intended. Yes, he did write Les Mis. So that's another piece of work that did also in book form and then in musical form. It is a movie as well, but it's different. It's just different. Anyway, I digress. That's all we'll say for that.
Context.
And context, yes, because context is king. The audition process. So, spoiler alert, I did not audition for this show. Because I was late. But I will ask you, Gigi, because I know you spent a lot of time. You put a lot of effort into auditioning for the beloved role of Esmeralda.
Yes.
And that is a hot topic, definitely. We won't get into that this time around. But yeah, tell me about like auditioning for this role, right? What you have to do. What did the director himself expect? Because I know he's a man of high expectations and he treats us like professionals and it brings the most out of us, but never auditioned. So what was that audition process like?
Yeah. So at this point, so let's take it back a little bit. Context is key. So at the end of my freshman year, I had been in 2 musicals that year, the fall and the spring. I had like featured parts, and then I got a pretty big leadership role as dance captain as a freshman. So that was super cool. And I was like really starting to love theater for like the first time in my life, because I wasn't really like a theater kid growing up. I was just a dance kid. And so I found out that we were doing the Hunchback of Notre Dame. And so I decided to look it up on YouTube, and I was like, all right, let's see what this is all about. And I immediately fell in love with the character of Esmeralda. I wanted literally nothing more than to play her. But I knew I was going to be a sophomore. There were a lot of other upperclassmen girls that probably would be a lot better than I was. So I enrolled in voice lessons that summer, and I just began to watch and research. And so basically, I was preparing for the role like a year in advance. And so then that fall, I got a lead in the comedy. And then in the winter, I got another lead again in the winter Shakespeare as Lady Macbeth. And I was like, dang, tomorrow and tomorrow. If you know, you know.
If you know, you know.
I was like, dang, I guess I'm getting better at this than I expected. And I gained a lot of knowledge from Raph is shaking his head at me. I gained a lot of knowledge from the upperclassmen that I was super fortunate to work with and my director. And I was just having the time of my life, and theater was just my favorite thing ever, which only amplified my want to play Esmeralda. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to get this. But I thought, no chance. I've been given enough opportunity already. It's not going to happen. There were so many upperclassmen girls. I just thought that I didn't have a chance. But auditions were super early in December. And so I just grinded trying to get my voice better with my voice teacher. I just did like absolutely everything I could to get that part. And so I go to the first audition, I sing my little song, and my director's like, okay, great. And then he's like, okay, so after Christmas break, I'm finally going to audition again for callbacks. And I was like, after Christmas break? So I wait 3 whole weeks, just like this agonizing waiting.
Right.
And then I finally get an email. You got called back for Esmeralda. And I was like, yes, let's go. I did it. Like, just the callback itself was enough for me to be super excited. And then I saw in the list that there were 2 senior girls and 1 junior girl, all 3 of which were my friends. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go to the callback. I probably won't get it, but we'll see. So we have this callback in early January, about a month after I auditioned. We have to learn 3 of her songs and then a few of her lines with a Quasimodo that was called back and a Phoebus that was called back. So I do that. I feel great. I feel really excited. And he was like, I'll let you know as soon as possible. So again, a few days go by. I'm super anxious and excited. I get called back again. And I'm like, what? Like that it doesn't happen in high school theater, maybe professional theater, but not high school. And so I was like, okay, we have to learn 2 more of her songs. I forget exactly what happened, but I think I went back, sang again. It was the same group of girls. And then I was like, okay, he's bound to release the list. Or so I thought. Oh. He sends us at 6 p.m. the night before our 3rd callback. He sends us an entire choreography video that we have to learn and memorize. of Rhythm of the Tambourine. And if you don't know the musical, it's basically this entire solo dance that Esmeralda does all on her own. And our choreographer is going to judge our dancing. So I'm a dancer, but even I am like shaking in my boots. It's 6 p.m. I have a ton of homework to do. I already had dance earlier that day. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what the heck? And so I learned the whole thing, kind of pull an all-nighter, which was not very smart. I go, I do the dance. And I'm like, oh, I'm so ready for this to be done. And I knew at that point he wasn't going to call us back anymore. And then I think 2 days go by and I'm sitting in my voice lesson with my voice teacher and my phone is blowing up. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what's this? It's all my friends texting me, have you checked the cast list? And then, of course, at the bottom of my screen is a little notification from my director with the cast list. And I was so excited. I was like, I seriously, like, I've made it this far in the callbacks. I have a chance. So I said a little prayer, and then I told my voice teacher, I was like, you open it. And sure enough, I got the part. And it was seriously one of the most exciting days ever. And that was a very long story, but that basically gives you the context of how I got there.
I think it's very cool just to hear that story, right? As a person who's never gone through auditioning and what it takes to audition for a role, it is just fascinating. It's like, oh, yeah, so that's how she got that role. I didn't audition.
Yeah, Ralph, tell her your introduction.
My story. All right, so it was already common knowledge to me that the musical needed men in the show. So I go, it's like, yeah, sure, I'll think about it. It's not a guarantee that I was going to be involved in this, but I was open-minded. But I feel like I always got hints at it, right? Soldier number 4 got in, and he's like, yeah, I'm doing it. So I'm like, okay. And then Frollo, our friend, he starts talking about, his villain arc, and he's having a great time. So those were 2 hints that I already was like, okay, maybe I should. My friends are joining. And then the night before I said yes to going into the show, I see my friend, Soldier number 4. I'm getting a ride home. Right. His script is in the back. So I start taking a peek while he's driving me home. Like, wow. So I'm reading the script. I think I just go through like a few pages, but instantly I'm like, okay, this is something else. So I say, okay, fine. Now I'm like, okay, now I'm interested in joining the show. I did not want to talk to our director or the music director at all because I'm like, I don't know what I'm getting into here. But the next morning, I walk into CMT. Lo and behold, we're breaking open the Word. So the music director is there because she's also the liturgist. And so I walk in and she announces in front of the room, we need men for Hunchback. And she's calling out every single guy. Yeah, I see you, the president and, Mr. Soccer. And they're like, nah, whatever. And I'm like, okay. I think this is a sign from the Holy God to audition to. And so I'm like, screw it. I walk up to her and I'm like, you know what? It's my senior year. Why not? And she just goes ecstatic.
We were all so excited. Like, I didn't even know Raph personally. And I was like, oh my gosh, another guy joined. Our theater program is back. Yeah. And not that it was like a life-changing thing, but like honestly for our community it was, because our program was so dead and all of a sudden all these people were joining, and it was really exciting to have you as a part of the fam.
And so there you go. I think it was that day, I think. So I said yes. Let's start there. I said yes. She sent out an email to the director and she's like, he's in. And so I go to 7th period. The director is like, okay, great. Thanks for joining. Pick up script. I was like, great. Fantastic. She emails both of us and she's like, if you're interested in singing, go ahead. At this point, I was committed to being soldier number 3 and that was it. didn't think about being a fellow gypsy or something like that. And I'm like, you know what? Why not? Let's sing, because I know I could sing. So I'm like, sure, why not? I'll give it a shot. And she's like, okay, great. Do you know where you are on singing wise? I'm like, no, I'm not. I don't know. I don't know if I'm a tenor or a bass. I knew I was a tenor, but I said that because I'm like, oh, maybe I'm not. But I was right. So after school that day, me and Frollo, he's like, oh my God, you actually joined. And I'm like, yeah, I'm trying it out. So we get dinner together and then we come back to school. Man, walking up those steps to the music room for like everyone to have a sit and sing, whatever, was crazy. It was insane. It was scary. I got to find out, what section I'm on. But that was interesting. But that's how I got into it. That's how I got into this crazy show of The Hunchback of Notre Dame. But I want to hear from you. First rehearsal. Let's set the stage here. You got the role of Esmeralda.
Yeah.
Some of the upperclassmen girls are like, okay.
Yeah. Some people were really unhappy. But I was on top of the world. Like, this had been something that I was working towards for a year at this point, almost a year.
Right.
Yeah.
And you, like, I'm assuming, right, you're friends with all the people that got callbacks as well.
Yeah.
Right. You're walking into the first rehearsal after the cast has been released. Obviously, they had their reactions beforehand, but you walk in. This is real. This is it. Mm-hmm. You are actually Esmeralda.
Yeah.
And what is that like? What did that moment feel like where, oh, shoot, I'm Esmeralda. I'm ecstatic. But you look over in the corner and there's the other girls, but they're your friends. So it's like super weird. But yeah, what did that first rehearsal look like?
So I still remember basically what it was is we just like read through the script. And I remember the day after we had gotten the cast list, there was just this awkward tension in the air about it. For me, it was like a really difficult balance because it was like one of the most exciting times in my life. I had been a child of like really toxic dance environment where I never felt like I was good enough. And I finally found something that I felt like I was good at. And that brought me a lot of joy. And that made me feel so much happiness and like a community that I was a part of. And so it was like this disappointment for my friends, but also extreme excitement for myself that I kind of felt like I had to keep in. And one of my best friends that I had worked with all year ended up getting cast as Quasimodo. And so that was awesome. And then one of my other great friends was Phoebus. And one of my other great friends was Frollo. And one of my other great friends was Clopin. So it was just like so much goodness. But at the same time, I definitely felt like a lot of guilt, kind of. Because it was like, I'm a sophomore. Do I really deserve this? For the first few weeks, I really just felt like I was not good. And I was not going to do the role justice. And I felt like it should have gone to someone who was better. But then I was like, you know what? I need to stop pitying myself and actually rise to the occasion because I worked for this. And I'm going to do this. There's nothing that's going to stop me from giving it my all.
Yeah, it is definitely a scary place. I would say so. When you walk into a room and you're like, okay, few people in this room, we're competing for this spot. We're competing for the chance to lead this show in the female role. And now we're like, okay, now we have to be buddy-buddy.
Yeah.
Like, okay, put that behind us. Yeah. It's definitely tough. But when I walked in for my first rehearsal, it was there. I'm like, yeah, she probably deserved the role. I don't know. I did not know any of the lore. But it was like walking in, like, I did not know why I was there, what the hell I was doing. But it was definitely something where I'm like, okay, well, I instantly respect everyone because they are in this process already. I'm just a fellow walking in.
I mean, Raph, you brought so much to that show. Like, don't underestimate yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I know I did, but like putting myself in my own shoes at that time was like, what's going on? I'm like,
that's fair. That's fair.
I'm like so confused. But I just remember this one moment. I think we went through Is it 25B or 24B? I'd never.
It's 25B. That
25B.
name is forever ingrained.
25B.
It's so bad.
We sing through 25B. Holy crap! I have no idea what the hell is going on. I'm trying like my hardest to like sing here because I've never done choir before this, right? So I've never actually sang with other people around me. We go to the next song, whatever it is. And this particular person sits next to me. I'm like, oh, shoot. Okay, you better not mess this up here. First impressions, right? So you better get straight. And I think that's just me in general, just like trying to be as best as I can be, no matter what. Yeah. So it is definitely scary to sit next to this person because you are the main lead in this show. So it's like, as an extra, sort of say, it's very like intimidating for me in that time. But yeah, if you guys didn't guess already, Gigi is the one who sat next to me, and we did not talk. I mean, we knew of each other definitely, but we did not talk at this time. So it was
spoiler alert. I low-key thought that Raph didn't like me. Because I was friends with all of his friends, yet he like didn't talk to me for the first few weeks.
Yeah, because you're gross.
I was like, does he?
I'm just kidding.
And I was like, oh damn, I don't know what.
And I've told her this 1,000 times. It was the complete opposite. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to say fanboying here, but it's like. I'm like, wow! Oh my gosh, the lead is talking to me. I mean, I thought you were so cool.
I was 2 years younger than you, bro.
I know, but that's just the way I am. Like, you're doing all these incredible things, so I'm like, oh, okay. How do I compare to this? Because I'm like, I can't. But
you are incredible, Ram. Like, your presence in that show just completely upped its level by so much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
the fight scene. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh yeah. Guys, there was a fight scene. It was so cool. Like sword fighting. Yeah.
But we'll get into that in a few moments here. But yeah, it's like, I'm here intimidated, but we got through it anyway. But I remember like specific moments where we were sitting in the rooms and she was like, yeah, we aren't going to make it to opening day.
I remember that too.
And it was very definitely intimidating. But I remember my first physical rehearsal. I think it was everyone's physical rehearsal because you guys were just doing sit and reads and singing, learning music up till that point. I think this was not during a school day.
Yeah.
Right. Work with a choreographer. Spoiler alert, not spoiler alert, but fun fact, my brother danced with the choreographer. It was crazy. Did not see that at all until he mentioned it.
By the way, we love this choreographer. Yes. She's incredible. Shout out to you if you're listening.
If you're listening to this, probably you will after Esmeralda here starts yapping about it during the rehearsals. But yeah, it was definitely crazy. Looking at this, I'm like, yo, what the hell did I just join? So I'm like, okay, we're going through the first rehearsal, dancing to it. We're learning the dance that you did for Topsy Turvy. I think it was Topsy Turvy 2 at the end part. And I'm like, hell no, I can't do this. I'm super confused. I'm trying my hardest, but it's like, what the frick?
Yeah, it's hard, guys.
It was difficult. It was that ending bit was hard choreography. And
yeah.
I mean, you nailed it along with King Louis and the other people.
Thank you.
But it's definitely a hard first choreo to get into. But I walked out of that day thinking like, okay, I can do this. I can compete and try my best to be the best actor I was, because my role was kind of in question of, okay, what exactly am I doing here? First, I'm a soldier, and now I'm like adding all these other roles on. And so I kind of missed the first blocking of the prologue. I had an appointment that day, so I had an excuse, but I
remember that.
I remember it. Like, our director walked up to me the next day. He's like, do you understand the schedule? And I go, yeah, I do. No, I didn't. He walked away, and he's like, a few moments later, he sends me an email. Hey, I know you just signed up to be a soldier, but we're going to need you to step it up here and attend all rehearsals. So I'm like, okay, great, fantastic. So I have to show up every single day after school. And I think it was later when I realized I had the first spoken line of the show. Yeah, I think it was kind of a consequence for missing the first rehearsal.
Hey, you nailed it.
Yes, on the morning of
January 6th, 1482.
it was exciting. I mean, I didn't. It was funny, but yeah, that was just a crazy moment in time of like, okay, this is getting serious now. You're in the show, you're committed to this, and now you have to, be soldier number 3 and be the gypsy you always wanted to be.
You're joining my squad now. You're one of us.
So it was definitely a fun process of trying to acclimatize to this new environment. But Gigi, take me through the first rehearsals, those first few weeks until until Tech Week, right?
Yeah.
What did those weeks sound like? Because you were committed to the role. So what did those weeks look like for you?
Well, I mean, every part in this show was incredibly important, not just mine in the whole storytelling process.
Among the 21 people that were in.
Among the 22 actually, 22 people.
Yes, sorry, 22.
Yes. So Esmeralda was the hardest role that I've ever played in my life. Lady Macbeth was hard for a number of reasons, but then Esmeralda just took it up even further. She has to be so vulnerable, and she's just such a layered character, and she's got this beautiful relationship with Quasi that I really thought reflected my friendship with a real Quasimodo character of just this kindness and this willingness to kind of just let go and have fun with each other. And that was just such a beautiful thing to create with character development, especially with an actor that I've worked with before. Shout out to you if you're listening. And then her romantic relationship with Phoebus that sort of comes from a place of enemies to lovers was so much fun to create, but 100% pushed me out of my comfort zone. And luckily, my co-star made me feel super comfortable throughout the whole part, but it was definitely a very vulnerable state for both of us. If you haven't seen the show, they have this big kiss, which was really an odd experience for sure. Doing that in front of your parents every single night, I would not recommend it. But,
wow. Yeah. I mean, okay, there are worse. You guys toned it down. You toned it down. There are definitely worse stuff. Worse stuff.
It's 11 measures of music, so it's pretty long.
Oh yeah,
but luckily, if anything, it was such a good experience in professional acting that I'm really grateful to have gained. So I'm glad I got to work with him through that. And someday at the end when they're in the jail and Esmeralda knows that she's going to die was honestly, out of all of the scenes that I've ever done, it's probably the one that I'm most proud of because the two of us just really embodied those characters, and I'm really proud of his work and the characters that we created together. So that was really exciting. And then Frollo, actually one of my best friends played Frollo, which was very, very hard because in the fall we had played love interest with each other in a comedy. So it went from fun, happy, cute acting to a really, really, really difficult relationship on stage. Frollo, if you don't know, is the Archdeacon of Notre Dame who lusts after Esmeralda and eventually ends in a very, very dark scene where he assaults Esmeralda. And that was something that was really, really hard to do throughout the rehearsal process. Again, my co-star really made me feel completely comfortable when he could. But obviously, these are uncomfortable topics in a show that really reflects the ugliness of humanity and what can happen when someone gets too much power, as Frollo does, and how women are viewed by men in society. Esmeralda had to dance to make a living for herself. She didn't ask to be objectified by men, and she wasn't trying to bewitch Frollo in the way that he thought that she was or that he accused her of. As much as that was a really hard thing to do, and that was a big challenge in the rehearsal process, it was a really important story to tell. And I'm really glad that I got to do that because those stories need to be heard. And then working with Clopin and the ensemble was always a blast. Lots of dance numbers, lots of fun scenes like topsy-turvy. And so there was just like so many happy memories and inside jokes that came from all of those scenes in the rehearsal process. And I remember the first day of Tech Week, I got like viscerally ill, like so sick. And I didn't tell anybody because if you're a theater kid, if you know, Tech Week is like literally the worst time to get sick. I was super sick and that made Tech Week really hard, but I recovered super easily. And Tech Week of Hunchback is like, looking back, one of my favorite times in high school ever. It was so emotional. And I remember the night before we opened, I just like cried tears of like happiness because I was just so proud of our hard work and so grateful to have met you, Raph, and to have met our other friends that joined, if you know who I'm talking about, and to just grow closer with the people that I had been with for so long. And by the end of Tech Week, I was like, this is such a beautiful show.
Yeah, it was a lot of the things that we did during that whole process was so much fun. Mixing with stress and stuff like that, it was definitely something new, but I definitely no regrets joining that show. I think I said it was the best decision of my high school, not my high school career, my senior year. It's up there in my high school career, but the best decision of my senior year is joining that show. It was just weird, it takes me back to middle school days of doing that, Peter Pan Jr. or whatever that we did in middle school. But it was definitely something that I'm like, oh yeah, this is what was special. And it was very weird for me to, put on the costume and do all this stuff and wear the boots. Luckily, we did not have to do makeup at all, so it was fun.
I did.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Not you.
The females did. The males did not. The females, however you identify, but the feminine roles did have to mask themselves, if you know what I mean. And while they were doing that, we were playing board games and Smash in the boys' dress room. So it was definitely
Smash as in Super Smash Bros.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yes, that I should clarify that because that may sound wrong to the people who don't understand. But yeah, so we had a fun time just going through it. And I remember, going through the fight scenes and doing the choreo for Topsy Turvy 2, which was hard. That was like, that was the only, sorry, choreographer. I know I should have done better about practicing this, but that was the only one that I actually did in my own time, like tried to nail down. Cause I'm like, this is a point in the show where it's like, this is the hardest number, choreo wise. So you should really get this down. I remember the day, I think it was one of the tech rehearsals, but we nailed it. We absolutely nailed it. And the choreographer just absolutely went berserk because we just got it down. And in that moment, I'm feeling, holy crap, we got this in the bag. And so we just have a great time, have a fun time doing it. Tech Week was like redlining, definitely. And so when we finally get finished with it, with just running the show once, because we had to split it. But I remember when we were running Act 1, there was a particular scene in the midst of Topsy Turvy that Mr. Hunchback gets absolutely wrecked, let's just say, by the fellow gypsies. So there's this moment where he's getting absolutely berated.
And made fun of.
Yeah, and made fun of. And so everything's normal up until the point where Esmeralda's supposed to walk in and she does not walk in.
Esmeralda does not enter.
She did not enter. And I look to my left, I look to my right, to my castmates, and we are just like, we're still playing on with the acting here. And we're still laughing. I'm like, look at this loser and stuff like that. But we're like, what the heck is going on? Where is she? And I think like a minute goes by. And
it was a long time.
It was a long time. To her credit, she did have a quick change there. So It was
a malfunction. Luckily, it was tech week, so it was fine.
Yeah, so this was not during the show, but it was just funny for you to run on stage and say the line. The director goes, "All right, we're just gonna cut there."
Yeah, he was like, "Go home. I'm tired."
And we picked it up the next day, and it was fun. I think one of my favorite moments during rehearsal, we were going through Act 2, but one of our castmates couldn't keep doing her role, unfortunately. So another cast member picked that up, and it was funny because now that she was on stage, I'm supposed to carry Phoebus onto stage in the start of Act 2. And now that person who I'm supposed to do it with isn't there anymore. So another person, we had to fill them in. So we were running through this just like 30-second fill in to Act 2. And we're getting the new person to acclimatize to what's going on now and where to put Captain Phoebus. And so we finally get it in like 3 or 4, and then like, okay, this next one is going to be the good one. And so we go in, and the first half of it was great, right? We set him down, we leave until the next part where we're running back on stage. And I think she goes like, Esmeralda, and I'm supposed to say, I don't even remember what I'm supposed to say. I think it was
Frollo and the Cathedral Guard will be back soon.
Well, yeah, Frollo and the Cathedral Guard will be back soon. My dummy said the arch, and I immediately, as soon as I said arch, stopped and said, yeah. I messed up, and that was it wasn't embarrassing for me. It was weird because I was not embarrassed, but I just laughed at myself. That was like the first moment where I was not embarrassed, and I just laughed at myself. And so we just did it, and it was perfectly fine afterwards. But it was just a funny moment where I'm like, "Oh my god,
so funny!
This is what it sounds like." So let's talk about opening night for you. What did that look like? It is, you work so hard to, everyone worked so hard to put the show on, and we didn't think we would make it on time, but we did. We made it happen, and finally we get to opening night where we can actually put this on in front of people. And what does that feel like as the starring role, the debut of Dear Esmeralda?
Of my lovely Esme, as we like to call her. I remember I woke up that morning and I literally didn't do anything besides just like think about the show all day. And we didn't have a show until like 7 o'clock. If you're a theater kid, you can relate. And something that I did a lot for my characters, and something that I did especially for Esmeralda, was like journaling about the themes and the messages behind the show, and journaling about her purpose in the story. And I feel like if you know the story of the Hunchback of Notre Dame, then you know Quasimodo and Esmeralda, and you know that story of just humanity and how cruel the world can be, but the fact that Esmeralda gave Quasimodo hope, and the fact that he did everything he could to save her. That's kind of something that I like really thought about that night. And I was like, yes, it's a high school show, but this audience is going to need that message. And I just took my time getting ready with my hair and makeup. I was so excited. I got to the theater fashionably late, as I was called out for a lot. It's not something that I'm very proud of. That's like my one failure in theater, is that I literally can never be there at call time. It's so bad, guys. Don't be like me. But opening night was like the best thing ever. Everyone's energy was up. It was a great show, minus the fact that I got stuck in my corset during my quiz change, and that was like haunting me for like multiple weeks after that night. It was a perfect show. It was really great. What did you think about it, Raph?
Yeah, it was definitely exciting to see that we're actually performing this now. My parents are in the audience. I'm actually in the show. I remember that night because despite the excitement that I had, mixed in with nervousness that I had, I, for some reason, started playing Bon Iver. And if you saw episode 5, Bon Iver is not his first album specifically, is not the right mood to start this off. And so this is more like closing night vibes. I don't know why I started playing Bon Iver, but I played Bon Iver. And, after we did speeches and we did, everything to prepare for that, right, I'm walking to the stage, getting ready to do the Olim. And I'm like, here we frickin' go. it's go time. All right, let's do this. I walked on backstage and put the hood up, and it went off from there. I remember just looking out for the first time, right, singing that first Oli. As soon as I put the hood down, everyone steps back. I walk to center stage. It's kind of weird for me to say this now, but I walk on center stage and say my line. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I just lose completely everything. And it is just crazy to me that I was there singing the songs, doing the choreography, putting the bench out, watching people do their roles on stage, which was sick to find.
Yeah.
But it was definitely nerve-wracking to just do it like that, to see that process. And so at the end, when we finished, we do the bows, whatever. And all I remember is the specific moments on stage where I'm sweating bullets because I'm wearing like 4 layers. And like, I remember like during God Help the Outcast, I'm like, holy shoot, Esmeralda, hurry the frick up. I am hot up here. And
oops.
I'm like, she's too slow. I'm like, okay, any day now. But you go with the flow. But it was definitely hot on stage with all the lights hitting you and the 4 freaking layers that I had on. So it was very fun, very fun. I mean, I started embracing the role as you should. It's just like, as soon as I go off stage as a gypsy to become a soldier, I'm like, oh yes, switching sides, and start running to the dressing room, the change room, like switching sides. And it was very cool to see the process and to see that the show evolved as we put on another night and another night. One piece that I picked up on, which was very interesting for me to hear, it's After In a Place of Miracles, the best song in the show, 100%, in my opinion. God Help the Outcast is up there, but In a Place of Miracles just hits a different vibe. After that point, right, everyone is like enjoying their time, and then Frollo walks in, and he's walking down the steps, and everyone scrams except for Esmeralda, Phoebus, and Quasi, and some other gypsies. And I go to the bottom of the stairs, right where the staircase was, and Frollo goes, "Do you really think our soldier here," referencing me, "really found this place?" And they're like, "Oh shoot, oh no." But it was a kind of like, yeah, this is the inside guy, even though he was not the inside guy in the first place.
He was just a gypsy 2 seconds ago.
Yeah, I was just a gypsy 2 seconds ago, but it was just a fun remark to like, oh, okay, yeah, that's a nice pickup. But yeah, those are my favorite moments. I mean, like, yeah, another one was during mic check. It was weird because I have the last numbered mic, per se. And so everyone walks off stage before they hear me sing, so no one hears me sing. But this one night, they wanted everyone to remain on stage. So everyone's singing their roles, blah, 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 blah. And it gets to me. I sing whatever. And I remember our chemistry teacher, who was singing in the choir, was like, "What the heck was that? Where have you been?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And like at that moment, it was like Phoebus was looking at me, and the music director was like, "Where have you been the past 4 years? Because we definitely would have needed you." And I go, "Better late than never."
True. But also, you could have joined earlier, dude.
Yeah, I could have. But something called COVID-19 happened, and then that messed up the rhythm. But I digress.
It was God's timing.
It was, yes. It was God saying, here, this is the perfect time for you to enter and fall in love. And so that whole process was so much fun. But we get to closing night. What a sad time. What a sad time. I mean, I remember closing night was the most nervous I was because I messed up multiple times during the show. I messed up multiple times during the show. Like, I messed up the choreo for Topsy Turvy 1, not Topsy Turvy 2. But I also remember the line for the graveyard scene, and I just like swallowed my S because I blanked on my line. So I like took like 2 seconds and then finished it. And then I'm like, oh shoot. No one noticed it besides the people who knew what was going on. I messed up a lot during that stage, but I always remember the final moment I was on that stage. after bows. We do the bows, we go up there, everyone claps, then everyone exits. I'm usually the last one. Obviously, Quasi was there last before me, but I just looked up the balcony and looked at the stage and looked at everyone. And I'm like, this is it. It's over. Yeah. Now what do I do? Right? You're like, you put so much effort and time into this whole project, and now you just have to say goodbye to it, which is tough. So how was closing night for you? Was it as emotional as it like for everyone else?
I woke up that morning and I had found a piano version of Someday, which is the most sad song in the whole show. And I just listened to that over and over again and just cried. Because not only was I going to miss the show, but I was really going to miss that character. And what I realized about Esmeralda is that she really, truly embodies what I believe to be a true Christian at the time. Because she was not by any means brought up in a devout Catholic faith. She was not the most holy of holy people, but she was human. And in her times of struggle, she discovered the Cathedral of Notre Dame. And she walks in, and she's so overcome by the beauty of the Lord that all she can do is get down on her knees and pray for her people. And that is just, it's just such a beautiful scene. God help the outcasts is what I'm referring to. And that human empathy that she shows Quasimodo, whereas the holiest of holies, being Frollo, shows Quasimodo nothing but cruelty and abuse. It just goes to show that sometimes the people who claim to be the most holy are just as flawed as everyone else. And it's just such a sign that we're all human. We are all born sinners. But we are all also made in the image and likeness of God. And there can be goodness and redemption in every single human being. And I feel like that was something so powerful that show had that nothing else can replicate. And I just remember thinking how much I was going to miss that story and telling that story. And with those people, the family in Hunchback was something like I have never experienced. And it brought me so much closer to God. And being in that show reshaped my relationship with God, I firmly believe, because I had been given an experience that was like the highlight of my life. And it just brought out such a sense of gratefulness. And man, I miss that show. Nothing's ever going to top that show. I mean it. Like, I remember just bawling my eyes out during all of Act 2, which was fitting for the character because she's like getting burned at the stake. But those tears were real because it was like, wow, it's over. Like, it's done. And that was so sad.
For I think all of us to swallow it up and say, this is it. And especially for the seniors too, since we were majority of the cast, it was emotional for us to leave the stage saying this is it. Obviously, it affected more people than other people. St. Aphrodisias, I'm not talking to you.
No, not at all. What?
But yeah, like Gigi said, we learned so much during that performance, during this project, during this whole show. For me personally, it allowed me to grow, artistically and personally, as became more confident in my voice and closer to my friends that I didn't know I was going to be friends. At the start of senior year, I did not know I would be friends with these people. The amount of friends that I gained from this show, the amount of experiences that I gained from the show literally tops off anything. And the amount of time that I put into the show was so gratifying to see that it created something beautiful in the way that I was acting or I was singing on stage. Like, I did not put on Hunchback music at all after that day, because I knew if I did, I would remember and be nostalgic about all this time, this effort that I put into this show, and I couldn't bear the emotion. Like, I can't put it on. And so when you finally take off the costumes, you put it on the rack, you take off the boots, you put it on the rack, right? Obviously we have fun at the after party, whatever. But at the same time, it was like nothing that can top this. And this will literally never happen again.
Yeah.
There is no one that will recreate what we did. There is no one that can copy copy or do anything that we were able to do. And there is no way that those people in that room are ever going to meet each other again in that time, in that place, for that reason. And so knowing that obviously made me sad at a time, but, you know, it was definitely an experience where I learned a lot, and it really shaped the final touches, per se, on who I am and who I will continue to evolve to be. But so many things was birthed out of this show. So it was just amazing. It was just a beautiful time to be with y'all, and for you guys to act on stage and sing was definitely a tearjerker, and very sad to say goodbye to that show. It was very tough to walk out that building that day. I remember me and Frollo, like, while going to the after party, blasting Bon Iver, Restacks, right? Yeah. And we were forced to move on with our lives. But what did you pick up after leaving that day and realizing this was the last chance to be with this group of people?
Well, first of all, very well said, Raph. Honestly, that was the saddest thing ever. I remember getting off stage, just tears just pooling out of my eyes. I've never cried that much before. And I ran up to our Quasimodo and just gave him the biggest hug. And then I ran to St. Aphrodisius and to Phoebus and to Frollo and to you and to all the other ensemble members and all the other amazing people in that show, and just cried with all of them. Because you're so right. The feeling that we're never going to get that time back. And I seriously mean it when I say, I know I have 2 more years of high school left, but nothing will beat Hunchback. And I'm completely okay with that. Because that senior class, your class that graduated, just meant the whole world to me. And that show meant the whole world to me. And like I said, being Esmeralda really deepened and broadened my relationship with the Lord. And it was kind of cool because I do have a tiny, tiny bit of heritage from Romania and Slovenia. Something about that was very special. And the show itself, being in the cathedral for the very last time and standing on the middle of the stage, bowing and just crying, just that feeling of it being over, and just knowing that I have lasting memories that I'm always going to remember from that show. And lots of videos and pictures and behind the scenes shenanigans that I'll always keep with me.
Yeah, we didn't really mention this, but the set was just incredible. The ingenuity of the set designers. And when we view the show, that was what I always will remember, is despite our stage being small as it is, we made something of it, and we took what the stage gave us and we created something so beautiful. And it was very sad when we had to
take it down.
And taking down that stained glass window was very hard to see, because at that point, for me, it was, this show is really over. And now, a few days later, performing our final, Spring Pops concert on that stage was very okay, this is the end of my senior year. This is the end of my high school career. And now I have to move forward and start my college life and my adventure. But it was just a whole breathtaking moment of looking at the garbage can and seeing that set we had performed on, that we danced on in pieces, was very hard to see and was very hard to take in for that time. Without that show, who knows where we could have been.
Yeah.
Right.
This podcast probably wouldn't have existed.
True. I probably would have never talked to Gigi at all.
I probably wouldn't have talked to Raph.
So it was definitely scary. But this show opened up so much for both of us. Right. I would have never played Blackbird on that stage if it wasn't for that. And I would have never joined choir if it wasn't for that show. But yeah, I will leave it with this, is if you get an opportunity to do musical theater, take it. You may think it's lame. You may think it's stupid to do these things, but it's not. It's completely life-changing in the way that we see other people, that we portray people. It puts a place of understanding, of empathy for these characters that we're playing. It teaches you to put yourself in other people's shoes. And I think that's what made me such a good actor, is I had the ability to understand what is going on at that time. Being on that stage will teach you so much. It will teach you to be friends with those people around you, because it does take a team to put on productions like that. And for those people that think that, well, I don't get the starring role, or I don't have any significance in the show, you're wrong. No matter how small you have, takes you and everyone to put that show on, right? A show isn't the main characters. I'd like to compare this to, when you're in a band, right? There is the melodic section and there's the rhythm section, right? The whole entire goal of the rhythm section as a band is to make the melodic lead section sound good. And it's not degrading you as an actor or as a person. It is just making something beautiful as a team itself. And so no matter what, I encourage you guys to audition for a role or stumble upon the role like I did. Doesn't really matter. Be confident in yourselves and believe in yourselves that you can do so many incredible things, because you can. And those people in those audience, no matter what you think, maybe they think they're judging you, right? Because you don't know these people. But here's a tip. They don't know what's going wrong unless you show it. So that's what I'll leave it. Yeah. Mic drop.
Mic drop. Amen. Theater is magic. It is such a beautiful experience. Coming together to create is something that I've always loved, which is part of the reason why we are doing this podcast. I just love creating. It's amazing. And with that, I think it's time to close this episode of the Crazy Catholics podcast. Today, we covered our beautiful experience with our spring musical, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and the process of bringing the bells to life. Raph and I are always excited to share our thoughts with you, so make sure to join us for our future episodes.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Crazy Catholics podcast. We really appreciate your support. Please be sure to follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts at Crazy Catholics. Okay, Crazy Catholics podcast. And be sure to tune in for next week's episode of reflecting on our favorite Bible verses and stories, where we talk about what stories impact us the most, especially when we're reading it or when we're reflecting on it to appear in our own lives. But it's a really, really good topic, and we think that you'll enjoy it. Definitely 100% sure. If you think that we're ending Hunchback like this, we're not. There is a future episode coming out that will dive deep into the more musical type stuff of the songs and things. So we won't leave Hunchback on this note, but that is what we will show you guys next. But I digress. As always, I'm your host, Raph, joined by my amazing co-host, Yada. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And remember to walk by faith. Bye.